Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the DMZ America podcast for October 28th, 2024. I am Scott Stantis, coming to you from the right.
And I'm Ted Rall, coming to you from the left. And I should point out that we are both editorial cartoonists, and we are joined by one of our colleagues.
Yes, a guy who has the Order of Canada, the first person ever to appear on the DMZ America podcast who has the Order of Canada.
True.
So congratulations on that. This is Michael DeAdder. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Michael, has experienced what virtually every cartoonist in North America has experienced, and that is to be let go by his paper, the Chronicle Herald, on October 8th after 27 years with that publication.
Well, that was still the grace. That was the probationary period. He hasn't gotten to 30 years yet. So.
Yeah. That's Canadian. So apparently, and if you worry about Michael at all, you don't have to. Apparently, he's been telling us prior to recording this that he's doing just fine, and that the Chronicle Herald can go to hell. That's my comment there. So, Michael, you doing okay?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. Yeah. I got picked up. I was working once a week for Canada's Globe and Mail, which is kind of like our New York Times. And they picked me up one more day a week.
So how many days a week is that?
Is that Ottawa?
Just two, but it's, they pay what I'm worth. So that's a rarity these days.
Yeah. Wow.
And when you add that to Substack, kind of took off a bit and replaced some money as well. I love Substack. I think it's one of the solutions to the quagmire we're in as cartoonists.
Well, I was going to say, they're laying us off left and right, and this is a subject we're going to touch on and probably go into a little more depth here. But editors have hated us forever, always have. Mm-hmm. I can't speak to Michael's experience, but mine, Ted's. And it's always been this antagonism and this loathing for us as a profession, us as I can't tell you how many newspapers have let people go, have let cartoonists go, have dropped cartoons altogether. I look at a thing called Press Reader, which has the print editions, and how many newspapers now just have this vast landscape of gray, as if that's going to say, you know what the young kids love today? The gray. Yeah. They love reading. And the fact of the matter is they don't. Americans, I can't speak to Canadians, but Americans, are they reading less?
Are they reading less? Yes, yeah. I tend to think they are, but there's that large group of Americans and Canadians that still love their newspapers. Now at this point, they might all be over 50, but there is a thirst for news. It's there's a thirst for being filled by newspapers.
There's a thirst for cartooning, and just a quick analogy, and frankly, it's allegorical. So it's not scientific, but I think it bears repeating. I draw for Michael Smirkonish, who does a weekend show on CNN and has a show on Sirius XM. He's been building his brand, and part of his strategy was to hire cartoonists to do original work and exclusive work for his newsletter. Recently, he said he came out with a book called Smircomics, and went out to sell it, and assuming that he needed to sell about 2,000 to break even. Within less than 3 weeks, he sold 10,000 copies of it, and it's a collection. It's myself, it's Rob Rogers, Steve Breen, and Jack Oman. That tells me that the fact that it sold so quickly and so vigorously, that there's a real hunger for what we do and a real affection for it. I know you're going to hear, no one expects me to say otherwise on this podcast, that I love editorial cartooning. It's important. My point is that while newspapers have been vigorously wiping us out, it's still one of the few things that people seem to really enjoy. I don't know how many of you, if either of you speak to people like younger than ourselves. I had a college course I'm going to be teaching again, but about a year ago, none of those kids had seen editorial cartoons. Not one hand went up when I surveyed them. And when we did the section on that, we had Marshall Ramsey from Mississippi Today was live in the classroom, but Matt Davis zoomed in, and they never, after that class, they fell in love with it. And I had to kind of like slap my head because many of them said, "Where can we see these?" It's like, I mean, you're experiencing the same thing, I suspect, Michael, especially given the Substack, the success of your Substack since you were let go by the Chronicle Herald.
Well, I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to the backlash, but the backlash has been intense. I used to work for, this is crazy, but I worked for every newspaper in 4 provinces, every single one in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, PEI, and Newfoundland.
You're the
Half
king
of
of the
them were
maritime provinces.
the maritime, Atlantic Canadian provinces,
Right.
because the maritime provinces are just anyways, that's another story.
But not
But
Labrador.
the Atlantic Canadian
Not
provinces,
Labrador.
because Newfoundland is not a maritime province. But you're right. It's a regional thing. I was with 2 newspaper groups, Saltwire and Brunswick News Inc. And as you guys know, I was famously let go from Brunswick News in 2019, which because of a Trump cartoon. I wouldn't, this time it's not necessarily Trump, it's viewpoints in general. By now, all newspapers don't really want strong viewpoints on one side or the other. But back then in 2019, it was Trump, because they were owned by the Irvings, and the Irvings had, is a multinational company. This time, it's just my opinions in general, I believe. They just don't want to tackle them. But I'm the first time I was let go, I went to half the newspapers in Atlantic Canada. Now I'm in none. So to go from like every newspaper in Atlantic Canada to 0 in 4 years.
What are they telling you? What are they telling you? There are 2 answers to this question, at least from my experience. What are they telling you? What are they telling the public? And what's the real reason?
Well, what they're not saying anything, to be honest. They didn't tell me. Well, if they were going to tell me why I was let go, I didn't find out because I hung up.
I read that on your Facebook.
To be honest, they started down the road. They were going, "I'm very sorry about this," and I knew it was going to be, "You're no longer working for the paper." And the next words out of their mouth, we've decided to go a different route, which is editorial cartooning. But this isn't about you. We're reducing the other cartoonist, Bruce McKinnon, down to 2. He's the guy with the job. I was just filling in for him, much like I've been doing my whole career. And when they got to that point, I just went, when they started telling, going through, "It's not you, it's us." I was just like,
I'm sorry.
I was just like,
so sorry.
I was just like, click. Like,
You
I
were
didn't
like,
get to, I
"Look,
didn't know if they were going to offer me a package. I didn't care at that point. I didn't know I don't think they were. I'm not under contract. Or I was under contract. I wasn't an employee. I didn't have
So
time.
tell us about the blowback they've experienced.
Well, you couldn't even cancel your subscription. There were so many people canceling their subscriptions. Like for 2 days, you couldn't get through. People were calling in. "We want to talk to someone," but you had to make an appointment at 4, later in the day to cancel
What?
your subscription. Yeah, it was that bad.
Well, a lot of papers
This
make
is
it
the
very
second-
hard to cancel.
Listen, this is the second time. Listen, the first time I think with New Brunswick, when I was let go in 2019 from Brunswick News Inc., the same thing happened. It's the same company that owns both now, but at the time that was the Irvings. I'm kind of word salading this and confusing people, but all papers in Atlantic Canada are now owned by Chatham, the Chatham Group. It's called Post Media, but they're 60% owned by, what is it? Chatham and Financial Group, or
Oh God.
look this up. I'll look it up on the.
So it's like your version of Alden.
Yeah,
It is. No, we're owned by the
News.
same group that owns most of the newspapers in the U.S. or a large number of newspapers in the U.S.
So,
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's coming. No, I mean, and you look at what's happening on the comics pages. For instance, Gannett announced they have one comics page for their 400 newspapers here in the United States. I'm not sure if that's happened up in Canada, but certainly happened like in Australia. They just got rid of all cartoons. There's two chains,
Yeah.
and one of them just said we're not having cartoons at all, which again is just I don't.
I find it hard to believe that they're focus grouping this and finding it to be
Oh,
popular with readers. I mean, considering the history of cartoons, right? I mean, the Yellow Kid and all that, like, you know, comics have always been popular with readers. I mean, it's a very forgiving medium. Even, you know, readers like their comics, even if the comics that the paper runs aren't that great. You know, they like comics.
The one comics page is like Blondie. Half of it is all done by dead guys. So it's Blondie, High and Lois. I don't know if Michael, I've ever told you this story. I love this story. Ted mentioned focus groups, but I love this story because it just says everything you need to know about editors and about how they run newspapers. We were having the Birmingham News said we're going to have a focus group, which was at the time pretty rare because it was just editors being editors, which means being assholes, and saying, we want this, we want that, you know, and then, well, I'll tell the people what they want. The focus group was going to focus on the editorial page for a day. They brought the group in and they said, so do you read the editorial page every day? Yes. Okay, so do you read the editorials? No. Do you read the columns? No. Do you read the letters? No. What do you read? The cartoons.
The page number.
Well, they read the editorial cartoon and they say, and they kept trying to say, okay, so we know you like the editorial cartoon. What else do you read? It says, we don't read anything else. We like the editorial cartoon. And they kept trying to say, well, what about the editorials? What do you like about the editorials? And the focus groups, there was 3 of them, kept saying, we don't read them. We like the editorial cartoon. Michael, I'm not making this story up. The next day, the same groups, they blacked out the editorial cartoon. So they couldn't read it. So they would get a whole different set of, you know.
Oh my
God. They were getting, this is like push polling. They're getting the results that they wanted, right?
Yeah. Isn't that wonderful?
Guys, I'm responsible for keeping us on track here. I think I really want to get Michael's take and all of our takes. We're having some sort of election type thing in a week here.
I read about that
in the US. And so, polls are, of course, even Steven between at least the public polls. Supposedly the internals are favoring Trump. Even if you believe the public polls, it looks like it's going to be Trump in the Electoral College. According to Vegas betting, 95% of Vegas bets over the last week were placed in favor of him instead of her. But obviously anything could happen, and there's already been early voting for quite some time. So I guess my question is, first of all, for both of you, where, if you have to call it, put your life savings, whatever they are, on the table, and you have to vote for one or the, you have to not vote for one or the other, but you have to predict which one's going to win. What do you think is going to happen? And Michael, definitely, what is the view from Canada? I imagine that if I were Canadian, I would view the U.S. as a large, unruly, kind of rambunctious, somewhat dangerous neighbor. How is it up there?
Well, so most countries have this are affected by a push from the right. Like Trump has pushed a lot of people in other countries to try to replicate what he's done. So we have we have a strong right-leaning population that's getting more and more vocal. The conservative option is polling very high, while Justin Trudeau's polling really crappy. So we might go conservative, and we're
When's the next
definitely
election?
going to go conservative in the next election.
When's that?
That's when Justin Trudeau has about a year and a half or maybe 2 years left in his mandate, and he has to call it before then. That's or he's in a minority situation. It means he can be on an economic or anything economic or anything, any bill that's deemed to be a matter of confidence, we call it. You can throw down, if they lose that confidence motion, they will lose, and then they'll have to call an election also. So that's the way the parliamentary system kind of works in a simplistic way. But so we got about a year and a half, and we're going to have a conservative government. The difference is in Canada and most countries is that vocal conservative loud group isn't more than 50% of the population. In the US, it hovers around, 45 to 55%. In Canada, it's more like, 34 to 44%. So it's not going, even though it can usher in a conservative government because of the parliamentary system, it's not quite the same. But most countries, Western countries, have the problem that you have. It's just that we don't have as many of the crazies as you guys do.
Well, I was going to ask,
and that really affects your country. Anyways, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say the conservative, a Canadian conservative is a little different than an American conservative. Always had. I'm remembering Joe Clark, for instance.
Was.
So is that different now? Do you have make Canada great again, or do you have those types?
Yes, we have those types. We have about if Trump ran in Canada, Trump would probably get around 20 or 25% of the vote. Like, we have those people are spreading those. You can call them whatever you want. You call them fascists if you want, but those people, like the real fascists, those real people that would take fascism.
Will they be? If Trump wins next week, how will that be viewed in Canada as an influential wave, or does Canada just go its own way and it does its own thing?
Canada kind of goes its own way, even if a conservative government comes in. And we got this guy, Pierre Poilievre, who is not a normal Joe Clark. This conservative you speak of is, which is called progressive conservative, or at least at one time it was called progressive conservative. And that was the Joe Clarks. And even though Brian Mulroney, who at the time was considered a far right option, was not by today's standards. He was our far right option from the 80s would be considered not even a rhino, a left-leaning freak in the U.S. But the real conservatives have come in since Harper. Harper was a real conservative, Prime Minister Harper. That was 10 years of real conservatism. And his deputy, and it wasn't really deputy, but one of his main players in that government was Pierre Poilievre. And Pierre Poilievre is right of Stephen Harper. So, and he's also a conspiracy theorist. Bitcoin, he would actually have, he says he would have at the time, just before Bitcoin's first major collapse, where people were red flagged, he said he was going to tie the economy to Bitcoin for a couple of years. So, and I know, like people, and now they're trying to distance themselves from that, or I don't know where they're going with that. But so we have our own issue here. It's just that he's a populist. He's but he's a little scarier than Trump. He's actually got the political smarts to back it up. So,
well, Donald Trump could win.
I think he's going to win.
Probably will.
I've already called it. I said he was going to win the first election, and he did.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's going to win this time too.
What makes you think that? I mean, that's what I think too.
Well, we discussed this. It's all the little things that are piling up. These little tiny indicators that don't exist now in this election. Like, for example, Trump's not bad-mouthing mail-in vote. In fact, he's encouraging. That's a large number of votes. Really, yeah. That's not a little thing. That's a big thing.
That's millions.
But yes. But there's other things that are like 1 million votes here, 1 million votes there.
Soon you're adding up to real votes. And plus we have the Electoral College, right?
The thing that's going to save it is every moderate voter comes out of the woodwork, and I mean every one of them. But yet we have Gaza going on right now. That's going to trip up some people. That's going to stop people from going in and voting for anybody.
Yesterday, I saw a photograph online of giant electronic billboards in the state of Michigan, specifically around Dearborn, that show Kamala Harris side by side with Liz Cheney campaigning, and under it says Kamala Harris supports Israel unequivocally. Liz Cheney favors the Muslim ban. Brutal.
Yeah, that's gonna keep a lot of progressives home.
It's gonna keep a lot of voters in Detroit, which of course is by far away.
I'm not voting for Harris, you know. And Gaza is not my only issue, but it would be a deal breaker for me. I mean,
Michael, what's the view of Kamala Harris up there? I mean, I know you're not speaking for all Canadians, but you obviously follow the media. You've worked for half the newspapers in the country. What's the view of her up there, if any?
Well, we've elected many women as premiers. We've only had one as prime minister, and that wasn't exactly a huge success. But we don't. If it was Kamala Trump in Canada, Trump would get 20% of the vote, and Kamala would win every seat. I'm sure Trump would win a couple seats in Alberta.
What do you
think maybe a seat in Saskatchewan?
I mean, from your point of view, what do you think? I mean, you know, Scott and I have talked many times here and elsewhere about what the errors that Kamala and the Democrats have made in this campaign, and of course Biden before her. You know, how do you see it? Do you think she's running a good campaign, or do you think she's made some unforced errors?
No, she's not quick on her feet. She's not really quick on her feet. She's somewhat quick on her feet. Let's be realistic. She's not bad, but she needs to be perfect. It's the U.S. election. In Canada, she wouldn't need to be as perfect as she is. But in the U.S., she needs to be perfect, and she's not. And nobody's perfect. But she you know, if I'm being real here, she's not quick on her feet. She has a likability problem with men, not with me. I think she's great, but she has a likability problem with men.
What do you think that is? Do you think it's sexism, or do you think it's?
I think it's slightly. I think it's sexism, to be honest. I don't think the likability, but I'm being real about saying it exists. But I think it's sexism. Because I don't think she would have the likability problem in Canada. I think she'd be very likable, especially like. Only in the United States could you put someone up against Trump and the other person have a likability problem.
Well, I mean, my take has been, and I don't know, Scott, how you feel about my take, because you've heard it a bunch of times already, is that this election's coming down to the devil you know versus the devil you don't know, and everyone obviously knows Donald Trump very. No,
it's not. It's the devil you don't know and the devil.
Well, but the don't know is, I think, the big problem for Harris. You know, I mean, the public is not connecting with her. We haven't seen much of her on a personal level. We don't have a sense of really how she would govern, what kind of person she would be. Forget about the policies. We kind of like don't really know her, who she is,
Well,
she's like.
She has put out her policies. I see her putting out her policies all the time, saying what she's going to do. Americans aren't listening.
I don't know. I don't know that I don't know. I'd agree with that. Just looking as someone who's a bit of a wonk and looking at the policies that she has posted, they're pretty nebulous. They're not very specific.
It's election.
Well, I understand.
Or they're completely
that's why I want them. Well, okay. Well, unrealistic. Gee whiz, we're going to build a wall and have Mexico pay for it. That was totally realistic. To Michael's point, and we had some friends over this weekend, and they, especially the woman lean Democratic, and she disagreed with me. Passionately, and to Michael's point, that they do know her, they have seen her, they've seen the rallies, they've watched her, they like her. And so I'm wondering if perhaps I'm just living in this echo chamber, and I don't follow Fox or any of that stuff. But I do wonder if sexism has something to do with it, because the women I've talked to like her.
It's part of it for sure.
And the women who don't like her are sexist in the sense that they just don't like women leaders, many of them.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's very strange. I was telling Ted earlier, a family member who just despises her, but he's also been divorced twice, and he's like, doesn't care for women. And so I think that plays very much into his decision making on this. I'm reevaluating this, but I suspect the fact that she can't seem to get any traction there is the fact that she happens to have ovaries. And I think another aspect is that she happens to have, be a woman of color.
But I think those things are all true. And I think a lot of things can all be true at once, right? And I think politics is always a series of perfect storms. And I think one of those storms is also, and Scott, you and I talked about this. Men, there's a huge gender gap in this election.
Massive.
It's bigger than it was in 2016 between Trump and Hillary Clinton, which is saying a lot. I think that men are being. I read a quote from a conservative pundit who said a lot of men are joining like these bro kind of movements in America because they want to be part of a movement that doesn't hate them. And there's a general sense among white guys that, we suck, we ruined everything, which is not untrue, and that we need to shut the fuck up and let the women rule and step aside. And so guys are feeling talked at, not talked to. And I keep wondering what would happen if there had been like one speech, high profile speech from Harris, where she talked about the man problem. Like in the United States, 58% of college students are female. That's a man problem. Boys are left behind. Women's incomes have been going up, but necessarily to get to closer equality, men's incomes have been falling, and nobody likes that. So like now, Gloria Steinem said in the 1980s, like, we know where we women are going, but we need to help the men now. And nobody ever did. And like they got passed over in flyover country. They're all addicted to opioids. They're on disability. They're left behind in the Rust Belt. And Donald Trump is like, hey, come hang with me and we'll talk shit about the ladies. I don't know. What do you think?
I agree with you. I think men do need to be brought back in. I don't know how to do it. And there's a side of me that that sees the problem, but also sees men needing to step up too. Men have to step up and realize that a lot of this isn't really about them. It just feels like it's about them. It's really about equality. But with that said, we've all seen what idle men can do in history. My idle men in history are not a group that you really want to leave idle. I mean, all you had to do is see the end of what happened in Iraq to see what idle men can do.
Mm-hmm.
They will blow you up. They will fight back. They will fight tooth and nail. So yes, there's a side of me that feels like men need to step up, but also that's a group of dangerous people to leave idle.
Well,
So,
clearly, I mean,
yeah.
you've seen the rallies, we've seen, you know, where this is. I think that's a great analysis. I have nothing to add, Ted. You really did a good job.
Well, thank you. Go ahead, Scott.
No, I was just going to say there's other issues, but it's an attitudinal. There's a thing in debate called attitudinal inherency, which is exactly, you can pass civil rights legislation, but if the culture isn't ready to embrace it, is it going to matter? This is attitudinal, in my view. This election, it's all about the feels, right? And how in the
about
world?
The facts.
Well, a lot of that is, well, we know that's a huge part of that is Trump's fault, but it's also Harris's. I mean, clearly the DNC, they workshopped this campaign. The polls told them that Trump would be defeated by a generic Democrat. So they decided to run her as a generic Democrat. And rather than Kamala Harris, they didn't go, like Scott, you've worked for campaigns. When you work for a campaign, you like it or not, you have the candidate that you have. And we can all wish that we could go back in time and wish that Joe Biden had picked, someone who'd been more successful in the Democratic primaries, in 2020, any number of people. I mean, I don't think Elizabeth Warren would be having this problem. I don't think Cory Booker would be having this problem. And I could, go down the line. I don't think Pete Buttigieg would be having this problem. But anyway, they're not letting Kamala be Kamala. We sense inauthenticity. She's guarded. She doesn't. Yeah. She's not willing. I mean, Donald Trump's not guarded. Unfortunately, he's just. But I think Americans will pick verbal diarrhea over someone who seems like they're hiding something.
Well, I think the other aspect going into this last week, this is what's weird about this election. You guys tell me if I'm off base or not. Because at this point, at least this is what I was taught. I worked in politics, as Ted said, prior to going into cartooning. And at the last week, the last 10 days, there was a duality. The guy you're running against is terrible, just the worst. Okay. The Drex, just horrible. But your guy is good. And this is where he or she is going to take you. I don't know that the Harris campaign is there, because every speech she's giving now is that you're saving the nation. And I don't know that you can say she's right or wrong. I don't think she's wrong, but okay. He's a threat to democracy. He's a threat to our very way of life. Fine. How are you going to preserve it? And what does America look like going forward under a Harris presidency? We're not hearing that second part.
Yeah, like what's going to be exciting about her? Like I remember in 2008, Obama was before he won, and it was clear he was going to win. I remember thinking, this is going to be exciting. This guy is going to be on the international stage, and he's going to be representing the United States and meeting with whoever the British Prime Minister was. I think it might have been Blair. And it's going to be like, I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to look great. Yeah. I could picture it. But I can't picture Harris doing any of those things right now.
And to finish the point, one of her last campaign stops is going to be at the Ellipse, where in Washington, D.C., where Donald Trump gave his stupid ass speech against a stupid ass crowd, and they marched and attacked the United States Capitol. That says to me, again, she's there, but it's all about him.
Right.
Versus, let's march forward together. She could have had it on the Mall, which I think she's also going to have an event on the Mall. I mean,
anywhere else?
Let's ask Michael. Am I off base here? Or
no? The only part that I would disagree with you guys, I agree with most of it, but the only part that I would disagree with is, I know that if she wins the election, that there is going to be a huge honeymoon, and it's going to be hugely exciting for half the population exactly. Mm-hmm. And maybe 60% of the population, or maybe 55. I don't know. It depends. But there will be the honeymoon. her honeymoon isn't going to last is the problem. It's not going to last a year. It's not going to last 6 months. Probably the Republicans are going to throw everything and the kitchen sink at her to ruin her presidency. And I don't know if it can stand that test of time, but the first 100 days or so are going to be magical, much like Obama. But convincing people at this stage, here's where I agree with you guys. Most people can't see that coming. Most people can't see that first, the magical moment when the first woman of color is elected in the United States.
When she's sworn in.
Yeah, most people can't. But when she's sworn in, you'll be able to see it. It'll be as exciting as,
and people will get
Obama.
Used to it.
It will be.
Will get very
close up of Oprah crying again, and half the country will cry with her. It won't last though. The Republicans will come after. But right now, they have not. The Democrats have not sold. I think the American people on what that's going to be like. That it is going to be exciting. And for it's close. Everybody's fighting in the trenches. Nobody's like. This is such a tense period that nobody's actually thinking about what that will be. All they're thinking about what Trump winning will be,
Well, I think Americans are also deeply concerned that if she wins, let's say election night, she wins, going forward, she wins Pennsylvania, which I think she will. But let's say she also wins North Carolina. I mean, it's over for Trump then. Then she can, assuming she runs.
I can't imagine her winning North Carolina.
Listen.
The hurricane has
a couple weird things happening, and I'm wrong. And Trump, there's a couple weird things like that happening, and my Trump winning will not happen.
I get a sense that there's going to be, and this may be a stupid thing to say, but having watched these things, like I said, for 4 decades, this just feels weird. The polls feel weird. I think election night is going to be shocking. And by shocking, I mean, he wins by a lot. I mean, by a lot, I mean, that's, that means something very different than it used to. But let's say he wins by 5 points or she wins by 5 points. Neither of those results would surprise me, because I think there's something going to be surprising.
Well, those would both be good for the country in that it would mean that we wouldn't be anybody who claimed that the election had been stolen would not have a lot of credibility.
It still happen if Harris wins, regardless.
Listen, Trump can win by 10 points or 20 points, and he'll still say it was rigged because he should have won by 70.
Well, he'll still say it was 70 because
he'll stay with that.
My votes were really huge. I had the best votes. Everybody says nobody's seen anything like this.
He's just such a character, such a weird character, just a weird.
I mean, I have to admit, he does make me laugh. And I don't know if that's because I'm a New Yorker. I really, I get him.
Listen,
I get him.
Listen, I wrote a piece for my Substack on how this isn't all this what's happening in the US is not Animal Farm. It's Animal House. It's more, it's not it's more Blutonian than anything. Like Trump is Bluto. When the way you cheered for Bluto when he got up and said, did we give up when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? And then the 2 people in the room go, Germans bombed Pearl Harbor. Yeah. Go with it. That was the Republican establishment going, there's something here. It's about passion. It's not about facts.
Yeah.
And just go watch Animal House again to realize that movie predicted Trump more than anything.
Those people, I mean, I get the sense. I mean, I get the feeling the Trumpies are having a good fucking time.
They're having a great time. They're
like,
they're driving in the middle of the streets, tearing down. It's the end of Animal House. Like,
Yeah.
it's more that than it is Animal Farm or
Voting for
1984.
Harris, I think for like a woman of a certain age, is joyful. But for many other people, it feels like, including those of us on the left, it feels like, taking your nutritional supplement, something you're supposed to do. It's good for you, maybe, but it's not very exciting.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that, but I think the battle for democracy has gotten boring for people, right? I think we hit a boring part, and it happened to be just before an important election.
I don't think that people ever really, I'll tell you, I think subconsciously, the American people most people don't really believe that democracy is at stake. I don't think that argument ever landed. And I think the simple reason is because that guy was already president for 4 years. Yeah. And January 6th notwithstanding, he left and there was no dictatorship. Yeah. And we're not all wearing jack boots.
Yeah.
So like what do you guys
I think it lands with the NPR crowd.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
I think it's more than the NPR crowd. I don't think it's just the NPR crowd. I think it lands with a lot of people. It's just that you're right. The first time we screamed, "This is about democracy," the wolf didn't show up, right? And then we screamed about democracy again, and the wolf didn't show up. The Mueller report didn't show up. The Russian scandal didn't show up. Mm-hmm. And then we've had, and we're still screaming it's about democracy. People have moved on but it's not that the wolf was always there. The problem is it's just the wolf. Like people weren't scared of the wolf. You know what I mean? It's the story of the boy who cried wolf, but the wolf was there beside the boy the whole time.
Scott's going to hate what I'm about to say, but I think the Republican Party has been the wolf. I think, going back to, just think about the progress from Richard Nixon, the most liberal president of my life, who, and then leading into, Ronald Reagan, who, moved the country far to the right. And then no Democrat ever ratcheted anything back in between these Republican presidents. George W. Bush was absolutely batshit crazy the way that he, let Dick Cheney run the country, especially, legalized torture, Iraq, Afghanistan, blah, 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 blah. Completely insane military tribunals. And so I think Trump feels more like a de-evolution or an evolution to me. It's not like he comes out of left field or out of right field.
No, you're right. But I don't think
if George W. Bush had never lived, Donald Trump would have never been president.
Oh, I think something else would have taken its place. But I think
That's what Robert Paxton says.
I'm not sure I agree with that. I think Trump didn't. I think I'm not sure what I think really.
Well,
no, I think Trump would have might be. Well, the factors that went into Trump running for president might not exist in a different timeline, but I think Trump could have been president without George W. Bush. I think what more led Trump to being president was Obama more than George W. Bush Jr. I think that it was a backlash against. I'm a firm believer in the pendulum, and the pendulum swings too far that way, it's going to come back, and it's generally a way of fighting against fascism, really, my pendulum's, you don't want to push it too far that way, like on the left, because it'll come back and it'll land in fascism.
I don't know. I think that, Ted, I mean, if we're going to look at the timeline, I really blame this on Bill Clinton, NAFTA, leaving the Rust Belt people behind, the Democratic Party telling those people, the blue collar workers, go fuck yourselves. We're going to have cheaper buckets at Walmart. And the price you have to pay is you. Well, that sucks to be you. And the fact that Obama did very little to assuage that. I would argue that the Democrats had as much to do with the rise of Donald Trump.
Oh, that's
as
true.
The Republicans.
I don't disagree with that.
NAFTA was Clinton, you know.
And I blame President Taft. I think I blame President Taft.
Hey, back off Taft, man.
That fat fuck.
We seem to be going further in time.
I think Franklin Pierce, that piece of shit.
Franklin Pierce, damn him.
Zachary Taylor doesn't get off the hook either.
I think
so.
Henry Harrison, 1 month presidency. 2 months too long.
So yeah, you know, how's Canada gonna react? You know, if Trump wins or if Kamala Harris wins?
Depends who's prime minister. Trudeau. It will be okay. So as of now, it will be Justin Trudeau, but Justin Trudeau's trying to be forced out. It's not working. It's not working. He's just staying in Canada for our January 6th. We just decide we want to stay longer. That's all we have to do. But anyways, yeah, it'll be Justin Trudeau. I don't know how Justin Trudeau is going to spin this. He's going to, Trump being president probably helps him more than it helps the other guy, because now Justin will have someone to fight against. But Justin's so desperately unpopular, I don't know how he can even stay in as prime minister right now. Everybody wants him out, even on the left, the right. They just don't see him. They see him as an empty suit right now. But Trump being the president sort of helps him slightly, in the sense that he has Canada will now feel a threat from conservatives down there, and he will do his best to paint Pierre Poilievre as a Trumper. But for Canada, obviously, the alternative would be better for our country if Kamala is, especially since she spent a portion of her life in Canada, in Montreal. You know, like that. You know, she gets us, but or at least we think she does. She may have to show off a bit and show how strong she is on the economic front, and maybe on trade. She may get tough with trade, maybe even tougher than Trump might be, but I don't know. Well, it's hard to say.
Well, I always thought a spin, and I've proposed this, and nobody listens to me or takes me seriously, is that on Canada policy is twofold. A, you guys are being too damn quiet up there. Yeah, you're up to something.
Yeah.
And two, we should invade, because frankly, you'd never see it coming.
No. I think we're the one. I think we'd surprise a lot of people in the world by I think we'd be hard to invade.
Well, you have been in the past. We've tried.
Yeah, we're also if you go by history, we when we're under threat, we actually put together a really strong army. I don't know why that is, but we're made of tough stuff up here. We were the best in the First World War. We were the troops. We were by far the best army in the field. We took Vimy. I know you guys have probably not heard of Vimy Ridge, but we took a ridge that just wasn't going to be taken, and we took it with very few casualties. Yeah.
Well, you're badasses enough that America just continually invaded Mexico. I mean,
Yeah, well, yeah, you gave up on us.
We like the weather better.
Well, we did kick your butt in the war. The goal of the War of 1812 was the invasion and eradication of Canada, and you guys like to call it a draw because the borders didn't move. Well, the borders didn't move because we kicked your butt. It wasn't.
Hey, let me ask
And
you a
then
quick
we
question.
burned down your White House for good measure. Now, most of those were Brits, but
Yeah,
we take
come
credit
on.
for it.
Well, fine. But
Well,
before we let you go, I wanted to ask you a quick question. We recently the editorial cartoonists, had our convention in Montreal, and it's my first trip there. Beautiful city, but I did get a sense of, first of all, very little English and signage and so on. So that for years, Canada, you had to have both, and apparently Montreal said no, we don't.
Yeah.
And so, is this? It gave me the sense that the separatist movement still has some legs up there. Is that still an issue? Will it be an issue? I mean, you being up in the Atlantic Canada, that's got to be very concerning. Did I misread things there, or is that just like a perennial issue that always bubbles under the surface?
Separation is nothing to worry about until it's something to worry about. It kind of, it's very low numbers, the number of people who would actually want to separate, but it still hovers close to 40%, I'm sure, if not maybe higher. They just can't convince 5 or 10% more to do it. But that they came close in 95, 93 or 90.
Okay.
95.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to leave that there. Michael DeAdder, thank you so much for joining.
Well, wait, where can we see your stuff, Michael? How do we get to your Substack and all the other stuff? All things Michael.
On the Globe and Mail on Saturday and Mondays. And Substack. I mean, I'm joining Substack. I'm still going to put my work out there. I'll try to find another venue for my work, but that's where it stands, and the Ottawa Hill Times. So I'm good.
All right.
Okay. All right. So Michael DeAdder was nominated for a National Newspaper Award in 2002, 2014, 2015, 2018, and 2021. He was the winner of the National Newspaper Award for
I didn't want to win it. I wanted to be the Susan Lucci.
In 2020. Yeah, you just missed out on that. He was awarded an honorary doctorate by Mount Allison University in May 2020, and he was appointed as a member of the Order of Canada in 2023. I only have an odor in the United States, so that's not an odor, not an order. Anyway, thank you so much, Michael, for joining us. I'm Ted Rall. You can find me at rall.com and whowhatwhy.org and Centerclip, along with Scott Stantis. And Scott and I both have, aside from this show, Scott helped me guest host this morning on my other show, the TMI show with Manila Chan. Just do a search on YouTube and you'll find it. Scott, where can we find all things Scott Stantisian?
Well, not a hell of a lot separate from Ted Rall, apparently. But you can go to gocomics.com/Scott Stantis. Go to gocomics.com/Prickly City. See my political comic strip. You can go to ChicagoTribune.com. Go to the opinion section. See my work there. Go to Dallas News for the work I do for the Dallas Morning News. And we can go on Centerclip, which is a great app with short little podcasts, 30 seconds, no longer than 5 minutes. Ted and I are both on that. So check it out.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
Pleasure. Look forward to talking to you soon. I may threaten you and come up to visit you in Nova Scotia. I am Scott. Scott, we'll talk soon. I know I'm coming down to Birmingham too. I'm going to end the recording here. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you again soon.
See ya. Thanks for having me.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, Michael.